fear and many others fear, threatens to jeopardize all that is working so well with college athletics. More and more, there is agreement that Congress needs to act to ensure that we have a level playing field, that we have real competition, that college sports can continue to thrive in the decades going forward. And this roundtable is designed to be a discussion with numerous stakeholders who are engaged in the process to get perspectives on what is needed and what is not. Right now, we have the brave new world of NIL and college athletes now, many of them earning very significant sums of money. I, for one, think that's a good thing. I think it is good that young men and young women have worked incredibly hard to develop fantastic skills that in turn can generate enormous economic activity, should be entitled to enjoy the fruits of their labor, should be entitled to benefit. But we also need a system where we have real competition and fair competition and not just one or two monster schools and everyone else as a hanger-on, but real competition throughout the league to make for good games. We also need to make sure the rules that are in place don't just focus on Power 5 conferences, don't just focus on football and basketball, which generate most of the revenue, but we need to keep in mind and keep our focus on smaller schools, Division II schools, Division III schools, and we need to focus on the many other sports that are not going to be playing on ESPN, but nonetheless provide an avenue for young women and young men to go to school and to get an education. We now have a patchwork of NIL laws state by state that makes it difficult to navigate. We have multiple active litigation going on that prevents the NCAA and conferences and universities from enforcing rules or even knowing what the rules are. And we have a lot of uncertainty for student athletes and for agents and collectives who are trying to navigate the evolving and unpredictable rules, but uncertain what they're going to be today, and even more so what they're going to be tomorrow. The purpose of this discussion is to listen. If we do it right, a number of senators are expected to join us. We have with us today Senator Moran and Senator Tillis, and I think others will be coming in and out throughout the day. There are many members, both Republicans and Democrats, very interested in this topic. And I will say, if we're going to go forward, and I very much want Congress to pass meaningful legislation addressing NIL, but if we're going to go forward, it is going to take bipartisan cooperation. If this simply becomes a partisan exercise of shirts and skins, we know how that ends. That ends with a vote that doesn't pass through Congress. So we have, and I will say, many of us here at this table have had multiple good, productive conversations with senators on the other side of the aisle, and I think we are coming towards some outlines of consensus. But we're not there yet, and I'm hopeful this conversation will help move the process forward. All right, with that, we're going to go and recognize each of the witnesses to just very briefly give a 2-minute opening statement, and then we will start with a conversation. And let's start with the legendary Coach Nick Saban, former head coach of the University of Alabama. Coach, you've had an extraordinary career, far too often beating Texas teams. I resent you for that deeply, but you did a damn good job of it. But we enjoyed any time we won. So with that, Coach, you have the floor.
You got us last year, so you can be happy about that. But Senator Cruz, Senator Tillis, Senator Moran, certainly appreciate the opportunity and all the other distinguished guests here to, be here, having been involved in college athletics for 54 years, really know the state of where we are and what we're doing and what the issues are and how it works, and certainly would like to do anything that I can, even in retirement, to try to help people find a better path for us in the future. So the issue here for me is not really name, image, and likeness. I think that's a great concept for young people. It's also something that we tried to promote when we recruited guys. It was academic support. It was create a brand for yourself. It was, see if you can create a career as a football player. So all those things are very, very important, and name, image, and likeness gives that an opportunity. But really, the whole idea of boosters being able to contribute money to collectives and really which establishes a sort of pay-for-play model, which I don't think is in the best interest of college athletics in the future, nor the participants, the student athletes themselves. Doesn't enhance them creating value for their future like, we all were dedicated to for many, many years to try to help young people be more successful in life, because you're actually going to college to create value for your future, not necessarily see how much money you can make while you're going to college. So I certainly appreciate the opportunity to be here, and I hope we've got some great people here that can provide some resources that gives us a clear path in the future of how we can continue to make college athletics something that creates a lot of opportunity for a lot of people to have a chance to be successful.
Thank you, Coach. Next, we have Greg Byrne, the Athletic Director of the University of Alabama. Mr. Byrne, you're recognized.
As Ranking Member Cruz, Senator Tillis, Senator Moran, and other distinguished guests, I echo Coach Saban's appreciation for putting this group together and allowing us to be a part of this. I believe in college athletics as one of the truly special and unique aspects of our country, and one that provides hundreds of thousands of opportunities to student athletes every year. I also think the discussion about NIL doesn't recognize necessarily the appreciation of the level of institutional involvement and investment in student athletes currently. Before we even get to any additional compensation for their NIL, many athletes, student athletes at the University of Alabama, receive over $40,000 in cash on an annual basis, including scholarship stipends, Alston payments, full cost of attendance payments, and other student athlete funding. Beyond the cash benefits, they receive a greater amount in the form of non-monetary benefits, such as their scholarships, food, nutrition, housing, academic support, leadership development, mental health services, financial training, sports medicine. Because of this, for most sports in college, the costs exceed the revenue. The University of Alabama proudly supports 21 different athletic programs, which we strive to run at a championship level. Only 2 of those programs, however, generate more revenue than expenses: football and men's basketball. The excess revenue from these 2 programs effectively offset the roughly $40 million annually the other 19 programs collectively run in losses each year. If it weren't for football, we would not have 21 sports at the University of Alabama. We do not want to see college athletics lose women's sports, Olympic sports, a lot of great opportunities and experience for the young people who participate in those programs. The vitality of college sports will be threatened. So those are some of my concerns and many of my colleagues' concerns, and we would love to be a resource in any way that can help to develop a legislative solution for long-term health of intercollegiate athletics. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I'd like to recognize Jim Phillips, the Commissioner of the Atlantic Coast Conference, the ACC. Commissioner, you're recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Senator Cruz.
There you go.
Good morning. Thank you, Senator Cruz. The ACC is very honored to be here this morning. Also would like to recognize our panelists as well. I know today will be a really informative session for us to learn from each other. And at the heart of my comments this morning, this is about the future of college sports for all of us. And I think what we fail to realize with all that has transpired is this is worth fighting for. Besides the GI Bill and the history of our country, no other group of young men or women have been supported through grant and aid, scholarship, access, and affordability of higher education than college sports. In the ACC, we offer 28 sports. It's the most of any of the FBS conferences, and besides the Ivies, it's at the top of the country. Over 10,000 student athletes, soon to be 12,200 student athletes with the addition of Cal, Stanford, and SMU. These men and women like Haley and Hannah next to me, former ACC student athletes, deserve our support and our attention. So I look forward to this morning's panel. And again, Senator Cruz, thank you for your leadership. We've met several times, so appreciate you and your colleagues and the interest that you have in this really important issue.
Thank you, Commissioner. Next up is Russell White, the president of the Collective Association. Mr. White, you're recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you to Senator Cruz, Senator Moran, Senator Tillis, and everyone here on this panel. Thank you for including us and inviting us to participate today. As Senator Cruz said, I serve as the president of the Collective Association. We're a fairly newly formed trade association of college collectives from the Power Four conferences. Our mission is to advocate for college athletes' rights to monetize their name, image, and likeness without undue restriction or interference, while sharing common sense reforms and best practices that promote a sustainable model available for future collegiate athletes. I'm here because we believe that Congress does have a role in helping fix this situation we have now in college sports. And as the traditional powers in college athletics have lost legal standing to regulate the marketplace, and in many cases, they've sadly lost the trust of all the parties to do the right thing. I'd like to personally thank Senator Cruz as well as Senators Moran, Booker, and Blumenthal for the contributions to this debate and the work that they've done with us. We hope to be able to support some common sense legislation in the near future. We represent 34 NIL collectives currently that are part of the association, with rapidly expanding and adding to that number from all of the Power Four, Power Five, if you include the PAC conferences. We believe that any proposal worthy of consideration should be rooted in free market principles so that every college athlete can maximize their opportunities, and ensure that governance structure for college athletics is tethered to current reality. I do want to take a moment just to underscore some things that the Collective Association advocates for and believes in. One, that is revenue sharing for all college athletes. We think it's a necessity, and that we believe that collectives are uniquely positioned to deliver the resources to the athletes while being able to save money for the affiliate schools. Number two is investment is long overdue and should be made to ensure that long-term physical and mental health needs of college athletes are fully available to them. Number three, we agree with the vast majority of college sports ecosystem and the college athletes we serve in voicing our opposition to classifying athletes as employees. I look forward to the discussion today, and thank you again for including us.
Thank you. Next up is Haley Cavender, whom I'm very happy to now welcome to Texas and look forward to your career at TCU. Ms. Cavender, you're recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you. Hannah, you want to join in?
Yeah, I'll probably just join with her if that's okay.
That works?
Gotcha. Thank you.
I'm Haley Cavender,
I'm Hannah Cavender. I'm her twin sister.
and we're also known as the Cavender twins in the social media space and athletic space. We are two women's college basketball players. First, we want to thank you and all the other senators for having us here. It's an honor and privilege to represent the student athletes.
We were some of the first athletes, male or female, to get a deal in New York City on July 1st. And it was awesome to see what NIL kind of did to us for now.
After that deal, we played basketball at Fresno State for 3 years, and then we transferred and went to the University of Miami to continue our basketball careers there and get to the March Madness tournament.
So over the years, we built a brand and business. It all started with our attorney, Darren Heitner, actually being able to get protection, and then going with our agency, Everett Sports Management. They've been proactive in getting us long-term deals and equity within those deals.
Some of the deals, we were the first 2 female athletes to sign with Champs. We created a energy drink with Bucked Up. We have equity in Soul Juice. We also have an NIL fund for female athletes in there to support them in other colleges. And then we have equity as well in Better Media, along with other long-term partnerships. Throughout these years of with NIL passing, we've learned tremendously how to invest our money, build connections, have multiple revenue streams through NIL, and the position it has put Hannah and I in today has completely changed our lives. So it's an honor to be able to represent all the student athletes and how passionate we are about name, image, and likeness.
Following Haley, we would just never envision ourselves building relationships like we have or having opportunities like we have today to be able to speak in front of all you due to NIL passing. So it's a privilege to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to the both of you. All right, we're going to close with Darren Heitner, a prominent NIL attorney who has represented several high-profile athletes, including the Cavender twins. Mr. Heitner, you're recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Senator Cruz, and thank you to the senators for putting this on today and for inviting me. Going back to 2019, I was asked by Florida State Representative Chip LaMarca to provide advice and counsel as he was going through the process of crafting legislation in the state of Florida to essentially void the NCAA's previous general prohibitions on NIL. This followed the state of California, which was the very first state to look into this type of measure. But when California passed its legislation, it wasn't to go effective until 2023. So what we in the state of Florida did was establish a July 1, 2021 effective date. That was signed into law by Governor DeSantis in June of 2020, leading to many other states passing their own pieces of legislation and creating this sense of a need for uniformity, which I believe is a main purpose of why we're here today. Interestingly, in the opening statement by Senator Cruz, I listened to the fact that this needs to be a bipartisan effort. And one thing I noted, you took a state like California that is primarily blue, Democrat, and a state like Florida, led in this instance by Chip LaMarca, who is a Republican, and whether it be for civil rights issues or for a free market, the parties came together. And we saw various states, red or blue, passing legislation, whether it's your perspective that it was nonpartisan or bipartisan, it got it done. And that's what I think is very important here today in Congress, is that we find some sort of medium where you can appease both sides and get something passed if we are going to that is uniform. But very importantly, nothing that is going to create a cap and limitation on true NIL activity. The type of deals that Haley and Hannah just referred to, and they listed a bevy of them, and they just started listing. There's so many more. I think, you mentioned knowing what the rules are. It's not only athletes who are born in this country. There are many who are here on F1 visas who don't know what they can or can't do. So providing some clarity there. Coach Saban talked about the fact that there's collectives that are now essentially, to a large part, paying salaries to players because there's a vacuum that's been created. That wasn't the purpose of collectives forming in the first place. It was actually a service to create a connection between fans and the athletes and have a subscription that would allow them to do so. But it's morphed into something much bigger than that. So it's figuring out what needs to be done there. And then you addressed agents. I think that's very important because you have a hodgepodge of state laws across the country that deal with athlete agents, and yet it seems to be there's no enforcement whatsoever. So it's created an ecosystem where there are inexperienced and sometimes unlicensed agents that are operating in the space and not looking out for the best interests of the athletes. I very much look forward to being here today.
Thank you. Appreciate that, and I would note that we've been joined by Senator Manchin and Senator Blackburn as well. There is widespread interest in this topic throughout the Senate across multiple committees and as I said, on both sides of the aisle. And so I think that augurs well for us to be able to come together and actually pass legislation to address the challenges here. Why don't I start off with just posing a general question. Everyone around this table are experts in different aspects of college athletics. What do you see right now as the biggest challenges with the current Wild West? Many have said that the status quo threatens the long-term or even medium and short-term viability of college athletics. Is that true? If so, why? What are the challenges that you're facing right now? And I'll open that up to anyone who feels inspired.
I'd like to ask, you have two people, I think, on the front lines, Mr. Byrne and my dear friend Nick Saban. But what has done, we call it student athletes. What has it done to the student part of the athlete? What's the chances of them graduating? What's the chance of them transferring their credits as they look at the portals and jump, 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 jump? What's the purpose of collectives that basically are out there and not in contact with it, not coordinating with the schools? All the things that we think, I truly believe it's going to destroy the student athlete as we have known it. But on the other hand, I think there could be a balance. So I'd love to hear from Coach and from Mr. Byrne, basically on the front lines. You've gone through it. So how do y'all look at it? Nick, what do you think, buddy?
We know, but basically, I always did what I did as a coach.
Turn your microphone, brother.
People be more successful in life. So you're trying to develop value-based system, just like a value-based business, that would create opportunities for young people to be more successful. So this started with personal development. It started with academic support to make sure guys graduated and prepared themselves for when they couldn't play football. And also the whole concept of branding and making sure you had an image out there that was going to be something that would be enhance your chances of being successful and create opportunities for your future, and see if you can develop a career as a football player. Now, what we've done between freedom to transfer and creating a free agency system where guys can transfer whenever they want to transfer, and the whole idea that we've created a pay-for-play sort of model in college athletics have created some issues in being able to actually have a program and a system that would enhance those very values that I just talked about. And how does this even impact other sports relative to Title IX, relative to non-revenue sports? And how do we continue to create some kind of a model moving forward where we do improve the quality of life of the student athlete, but create some kind of a balance in terms of competitive balance, which all venues have, some guidelines and rules that create some kind of competitive balance, which right now we don't have in college athletics. It's whoever wants to pay the most money, raise the most money, buy the most players is going to have the best opportunity to win. I don't think that's the spirit of college athletics. I don't think it's ever been the spirit of what we want college athletics to be. So that's my major concern, the combination of pay for play, free agency, and how that impacts development. And I can attest that I've had 2 NFL coaches tell me, and this is a football deal because they're concerned about the football part, that the players come to them less developed, with more entitlements and less resiliency to overcome adversity. And these are concerns that they have even in their football development. Well, if that's true in their football development, is that true in other parts of their development, whether it's academics or personal development? And each time you transfer, you minimize your chances of graduating by probably about 20%. Now we have guys transferring 2 or 3 times. So some of the goals and objectives of what we've worked so hard for the last 20 years to improve graduation rate, to improve health care for players, to have mental health care for players, all the things that we work so hard to improve on, we're going to start seeing slide in the wrong direction because we've created an environment that really does not promote personal development or that is going to create success for their future.
You know, one question I have to ask. You just retired from a amazingly and historically significant coaching career. How much did the current chaos and state of the law contribute to your decision to retire now?
Well, all the things that I believed in for all these years, 50 years of coaching, no longer exist in college athletics. So it's always was about developing players. It was always about helping people be more successful in life. My wife even said to me, we'd have all the recruits over on Sunday with their parents for breakfast, and she would always meet with the mothers and talk about how she was going to help and impact their sons and how they would be well taken care of. And she came to me, you know, like right before I retired and said, why are we doing this? And I said, what do you mean? She said, all they care about is how much you're going to pay them. They don't care about how you're going to develop them, which is all what we've always done. So why are we doing this? So, to me, that was sort of a red alert that we really are creating a circumstance here that is not beneficial to the development of young people, which is why I always did what I did. My dad did it. I did it. And that's the reason that I always like college athletics more than the NFL, is because you had the opportunity to develop young people. So, and I want their quality of life to be good. I think, as I said before, name, image, and likeness is a great opportunity for them to create a brand for themselves. I'm not against that at all. But to come up with some kind of a system that still can help the development of young people, I think, is paramount to the future of college athletics.
We were just joined by Senator Thune. Welcome, Senator Thune. Senator Blackburn, you had something you wanted to say.
Yes, to Coach Saban, as he's talking about the development of the student athlete, I want you, if you would weigh in on the NCAA's responsibility in this and the way they handle investigations and the lack of clarity that they bring, because that has an impact on that environment, in my opinion. And I'm from Tennessee, and I'm very unhappy with the way Charlie Baker has handled the NCAA so far. I had great hope. And Cory Booker and I have a bill we filed, the NCAA Accountability Act, to try to bring some transparency, to put a shot clock on these, to say, review something, make a decision, and get on with life. But if you would talk about that lack of specificity and clarity from the NCAA and how that affects college athletes.
Well, I don't think there's any question about the fact that the NCAA has had a very difficult run here the last 5 or 6 years especially. They couldn't enforce their own rules because of litigation. And that in and of itself, I think, put them in a really, really difficult circumstance. And I don't think they manage it very well. So I don't disagree with some of the comments that you made about how they've handled certain situations. But I also think they've been put into a difficult circumstance themselves because of not being able to enforce their own rules, because of a lot of the litigation that has come up in the court system that has sort of made it impossible for them to do that.
Ms. Byrne, you also had
Yeah,
Senator Manchin's
I just
question.
want to know what effect it's having on non-revenue sports.
Right, yeah. Thank you, Senator. And if I can, I'll address yours, Senator Blackburn, as well. So we're hearing the Cavender sisters talk about the impact. That's outstanding, right? I don't think anybody in college sports, we're all in favor of that. At University of Alabama, Bryce Young, who was our Heisman-winning quarterback, had national deals. Montana Fouts, who's a softball player of ours, has had incredible NIL opportunities. And that's, I think, what the intent of NIL was off the bat, and we are all for that. The stressors that have taken place that are involved both from a education standpoint, to where what Coach talked about with the focus or lack thereof on what the educational experience was going to be during their time is becoming more and more prevalent from a recruiting standpoint. What has taken place from the court system and the litigation that's involved and the potential damages that could come along with it are well into 8 figures, and those are resources and revenues that don't exist. And so the impact that could have on the Olympic sports, on the number of sports you are able to offer, the level of it, and you think, and I've heard colleagues say, well, we're just going to scale back what we offer to all of our, at Alabama, 21 sports, 635 student athletes, we're going to scale back what we do for them. Well, already there is Title IX lawsuits in the Power 5 level where you're seeing Olympic sports sue the university saying that they're not being treated the same, even though their sports from a revenue standpoint does not produce enough to be in the black each year. And so you have that issue from the court system. You have the National Labor Relations Board related to student athletes, whether they're students, whether they're employees, whether they're independent contractors, and the tax and labor issues that we're starting to see come along with that through the collectives and such, where they're independent contractors, and the tax responsibilities that are coming for the families and the complications that come with that. The transfer portal has been another significant issue. When Coach Saban retired, we obviously didn't want him to retire, but when that time came, during that time that we were out searching for our new coach, a lot of what our focus was back in our department was roster retention and trying to communicate to our student athletes that are there that the standard that Coach set was not going to change in our support of our student athletes across the board. So the transfer portal and the complications that have come with that are very, very significant. On inducements, what Senator Blackburn was talking about, where the NCAA is right now, there's not much they can do from an inducement standpoint, and Charlie Baker has said that. Senator, I think the timeliness of investigations is very challenging. I also know that because of lack of subpoena power and things like that, that the NCAA is often put in a very challenging position to try to figure out fact and fiction, and that's a tough position to be in. So I think from the what we can ask here in D.C., and we really appreciate this opportunity to be here today, is these are we're looking for some safe havens, and from an employee status standpoint, from a Title IX standpoint, and then just some safe havens from an antitrust standpoint, that we can have the enterprise of college athletics move forward and offer broad opportunities across the board to all of our student athletes, or 21 teams or more. ACC, what Commissioner Phillips talked about, offering 28. That's a great thing. And for those of us who are inside the athletic department, I think the Cavender twins would agree with this on a daily basis, and they see the impact that takes place on the young men and young women. It's special. It really is. And I think what Coach talked about and the impact that you can make on 18 to 22-year-olds, it can be life-changing for them in the right environment. And we believe in that environment very much, both at the University of Alabama and throughout our conferences.
Commissioner Phillips, you had some thoughts on this?
I do. I really appreciate Coach Saban's comments and Mr. Burns. I want to tell you a little bit about the commissioners that have come to Washington, D.C. quite often. And so, again, thanks to Senator Thune, Senator Blackburn, Manchin, Cruz, Blumenthal, Booker. You've been amazing. But I also want to say I have a different lens of having two student athletes in my own family. One at the Power 5 level, who just graduated after running track 5 years at Notre Dame, and a daughter plays soccer in the Ivies at Yale. And so I see it every day of my life in my work, but I also see it every day in my home. And the commissioners and I would just, I would clarify what's commissioners. The Power 5 commissioners have been to D.C. 12 to 15 times in the last maybe year and a half, because of the importance of this legislation. And I would say that there's 5 pillars, again, to build off of what Coach Saban and Mr. Byrne have indicated. One is we have to establish a uniform set of rules that present disparate laws from kind of outdoing each other. We have inter and intrastate competition. If you're going to have fairness in competition, then there needs to be rules that cross over from state to state. This isn't about reducing NIL opportunities. This is about fairness in college sports. One of the great things that have happened in college sports is name, image, and likeness, an opportunity that we've heard from the Cavender twins and others. That's a great thing. That's the United States of America. If you have a name, an image, and a likeness, and you have talent, you should be able to monetize that. That's fantastic. That's first. Second is we want to ensure that the NIL deals they're not recruiting inducements. That was never the intent, to Coach Saban's point. That was never the intent. It was about what your abilities allowed you to do, what your name allowed you to do. Not just, hey, you're a quarterback, you play a position, you get $250,000 without anything relative to services offered, services rendered. 3, recognize the special relationship that student athletes have with their institutions. These are students. These are students. And if you want to ignore the students' piece of it, then they should just be professional athletes. But graduation rates matter. 98% of these young men and women, maybe 99, are not going to play professional sports. Why would we discount that? But there's a needle we can thread to make sure that we aren't ignoring that 1%. That's really good. That wants to go to our institutions and not only get a great degree and play sports, but also be a professional athlete. We should embrace that, we should support that, and we are doing that across our country. Fourth, protect student athletes from unscrupulous actors. These are young people. Some have great home lives. Some don't have great home lives. Some have an awful lot of individuals for them to call on and to help them and to guide them, and some have none, besides probably their coaches at their individual schools. And our coaches never get enough credit for the work that they do in that space. And then fifth, provide legal protection, and Mr. Byrne indicated that. We cannot sustain legal case after legal case. That has really hurt the enterprise. And I will give Charlie Baker credit because he's taken over at a very difficult time, but we're starting to make some progress. Just really quick, and I'll wrap up these comments. We have now voluntary agent registration. I'd like to have mandatory registration of agents to make sure, just like anywhere you're trying to get professional advice, somebody has to be registered, has to take educational classes, has to pass certain tests, etc. Second is we need standardized language. So whether you're the Cavender twins or any of the other student athletes, you have a standardized template. It doesn't matter what conference you're in, doesn't matter what school you're in, Division I, Division II, Division III, there's a standardization there. Disclosure. There should be disclosure, okay? And that's helpful for student athletes to see what's going on in the marketplace. And fourth is education of our student athletes. Again, I really give our campuses a lot of credit, not just in the ACC, but across the country. Education of student athletes in this space so they don't get taken advantage of. Thank you, Senator.
So Haley and Hannah, I would love to get your thoughts and perspectives as student athletes. What's working well and what's not working well, and what's it like to experience it right now?
So personally, when I was a student athlete at the University of Miami, I think one of the things that was working really, really well was just being open and honest in the locker rooms was very good with us. And then creating a team around us was very beneficial. So making sure that you have, like you were saying, agencies that you can trust with our attorney, being able to, we have great parents that obviously brought us up to be able to tell us, okay, it's not a 4-year plan, it's a 40-year plan. But like you said, there's not always that in home lives. So just making sure that we had resources was really important for us. I think one thing that kind of lacked was, yes, educational-wise, there was a lot of resources on campus, but not like to the extent of how do you invest your money. That's something that I think that we can definitely see more of in the space, to be more educated on that, like you said, because being brought up, not a lot of people do have those type of resources. So that's something that I think that an area was a little bit of a lack for me personally.
In my opinion, too, I think that from our stance, we always, as female athletes, we kind of know the percentage of going professional is very low. So we always embrace, in my opinion, Hannah and I, like, get your degree, because after college, you're not going to go professional. If you do, the revenue that's there, it's probably better if you get your degree. So I do believe that, in my opinion, obviously it looks different at a Power 5 football school, but for female women's basketball players, I'm always going to look at a long-term plan, and that's education. So like from the student side of it, that plan never changed when NIL passed, because for women's sports, you're not always looked at the same level when it comes to comparing revenue to a big football school.
All right, so let me tee up two broader questions, and I'd love to get collective reactions to it. One question, there are multiple different pieces of legislation that have put forward that have different models for who's engaged in enforcement. And one model is a government agency or a quasi-government agency setting the rules. Another model is the NCAA empowered to set the rules. I would be interested in everyone around the table's views on which is preferable. And then a second question that has been referenced multiple times, but I think it's worth making explicit. There's litigation, there's discussion about making student athletes explicitly employees and treating student athletes as employees, and I'd love to hear everyone's thoughts. Is that a good idea or a bad idea? I've got my own thoughts on that, but I'd love to get everyone else's perspectives. And whoever wants to can jump in on
I can jump in. First of all, I'm in support of not having more government involvement. I think the hands-off approach is the right move. I think back, having worked with many agents throughout my career in athletes, you have the Federal Trade Commission that has actually been responsible for enforcing something called the Sports Agent Responsibility and Trust Act and has not once enforced that law. And so I don't trust, whether it be the FTC or another branch of government, to now take on more of a burden, which it is a big burden to now control and monitor whatever it is that Congress may pass. So I think leaving it in the hands of the NCAA would be preferable to adding additional government involvement. As far as employment status is concerned, it actually goes back to something I was going to talk about when you asked what's the biggest challenge. From my perspective, what's been created is a vacuum based on what is clearly supply and demand for athletes to receive something more than NIL. And there's just no way to actually pay that outside of what's been created through the collective ecosystem. And I think collectives should maintain some role, but not necessarily that role of filling that vacuum. And if there's a way to allow colleges to pay players, whether it be through what President Baker has suggested, through some sort of new NIL vehicle or otherwise, I think that's very important, because what has developed is the system of unrestricted free agency on a year-to-year basis. And I think if we're going to look at what is actually chaotic in the space, it's that. It's very hard for the schools to manage it. It's even hard for the players to manage it because while you have some collectives that are negotiating fair contracts, there's also a lot of contracts that I've personally reviewed that look unconscionable on their face.
So give an example of that, of unconscionable contracts.
Sure. So an example of that would be where a collective has the ability to now take over all of the group licensing rights for a player. So a player doesn't even get the opportunity to opt in or opt out on a group licensing deal. Additionally, an instance where a player, if he or she has already entered into a deal and now the collective wants to enter into a deal on his or her behalf, that player would have to effectively breach the existing deal because there's so much power. A lot of collectives, and not all of them, are now trying to be athlete agents and represent the players and take commissions, sometimes 100% of the money that comes in until they're paid back what they're paying out, and then take upwards of 50%. And the pushback I oftentimes receive is, well, 70, 75 players have entered into these agreements. It's non-negotiable. Well, it better be negotiable or we're not signing it. So those are some of the issues, but that's just barely touching the surface.
Mr. White, I'd be interested in your reaction to those issues that were just raised.
Yeah, well, I think the early days of collectives stepping in to fill that void or fill that vacuum, like Darren mentioned, there was probably some things that took place that we would love to go back and fix, right? The collective space itself has evolved as the NIL space has evolved. And I feel in a lot of ways we've brought a lot of stability to the market as a common way for universities, boosters to be involved, fans to be involved in working with the athletes. Speaking to the contract, I haven't seen contracts like what Mr. Heitner has mentioned, but I'm not an attorney, so I don't review those. I would say that one of the reasons that the collective association was formed was to be able to share best practices, to be able to make sure that collectives are operating above board, keeping the space clean, not have predatory contracts. Obviously, I would hope that those schools, collectives are not members of collective association. If they are, let's talk about it after. But, you know, I feel that a lot of those agreements that maybe have been in question have been cleaned up and really taken to the next level where that's not the case. In addition to that, a lot of collectives do deals and do not take any type of commission. They are putting the deals together for the athletes, and there's not a commission that's going back to the collectives. They're not making money on those athlete deals of booster money that comes in. There are some collectives that do things such as marketing guarantees, where it's a guaranteed amount, which is actually a guarantee to the athlete that if you get injured If you get, if you don't have your playing time, whatever, none of that impacts this. You're going to get this amount of money. Now, we do have the opportunity to market you and have brand dollars come in against that to a certain point. But then above and beyond that, collectives should not be, and to my knowledge are not for the most part, taking higher percentages up to 50%. That's just insane of somebody's earnings. That's not their role at all. And so that's, again, back to the collective association. We formed together to fix these things, to be able to share. Once we realized we're not in competition with each other, we needed to work together. And that's what we've put together, and we're working to help build this space, I think, in a honest and a productive way.
Commissioner Phillips, do you have thoughts on the two questions I posed? Number one, who should be setting the rules? Should it be government or the NCAA? And number two, do you have thoughts on whether student athletes should be deemed employees?
Thank you, Senator Cruz. I would say just in brief, we need a governing body that is effective and one that can obviously listen to the membership and then execute that. So as it relates to Mr. Heitner's comment about less government involvement, I agree. And I think the NCAA is suited to do that. But they're paralyzed right now because of the lawsuits that have occurred, because of some of the recent legal cases. So I would like for that to be reaffirmed at some point. But until we get some help here, I think it's going to be difficult. And I think my comments earlier about whether these are employees or students, I stand by what I said. These young people are students.
So what would be the harm if they were deemed employees? How would that hurt college athletics? How would that hurt college athletes?
Well, if you classify one student athlete as an employee, then you have to classify all student athletes as employees. And so what's the definition of an employee? Is it, to Mr. Burns' point earlier, that you have to be part of a sport that generates revenue? I'm not sure. I'm not sure. But here's what I would say. Additional benefits for student athletes has never been greater than it is today. Whether it's cost of attendance, Alston, name, image, and likeness, the mental health support, the academic support, unlimited meals, travel. I mean, all of those kinds of things have evolved over time. We didn't have that through the course of the last 50 years. So I think the NCAA has shown that there is an ability to continue to provide resources for student athletes. If you classify them as employees, then I think a bunch of those benefits go away. And I don't know what it does from a Title IX standpoint. I think it absolutely undercuts that. In a modern-day athletic program, and I'm sorry I was late today just with travel and coming in, but I heard Mr. Byrne talk about the funding of a department, right? The funding of a department. The funding of a department for 20 sports, 22 sports, 28 sports comes from 2 sports. In generalities, 85% comes from the sport of football. Nearly 15% comes from men's basketball. We can pay those athletes. Certainly, we can pay those athletes. And then we can pay, from a Title IX standpoint, the equivalent number of female athletes. So 185 and 15, 100, or whatever the number you want on the men's side, you do it on the women's side. And then you can go from 28 sports to about 6 sports in the matter of 1 fiscal year. I don't know what's important. What's important in higher education? I think it's access and affordability to higher education, and that's what we're able to do. And the last point I would make on this is, let's not forget what the feeder system to the United States Olympic teams are. It's called our college campuses. It's called college sports. I think the number, don't quote me, but I think the number is in the low 80s, maybe 82% of the United States Olympians go through the collegiate system. So that's how I would answer that about employee, student.
Mr. Byrne, did you have thoughts on those questions?
Yeah, thank you, Senator. A couple things. From we're more agnostic as long as that we have a system that allows the rules to be enforced. If the NCAA is able to do that, we would support that. If it's another body, we would want to support that as well. From employees or non-employees, we are not for an employee model. One of the things that does not get talked a whole lot about it are the tax issues that will come along with this, the benefits that we provide to our student athletes that are tax-free right now. For instance, scholarship or tuition, food and nutrition, housing, academic support, leadership development, sports medicine, and training. At the University of Alabama, for our 637 student athletes, we spend approximately $93,000 annually on them. And we have, all you have to do is come into our facilities during the off seasons of the professional ranks, and a lot of the professional athletes are back training in our facilities because it's better than what they get in the professional ranks. Okay, and we're proud of that. That number, that $93,000, significantly increases for student athletes who are on full scholarships, receiving cost of attendance, Alston benefits, and other support from our campuses. What's the tax bill for that? You know, student athletes have different opinions, and I don't want to speak for the Cavendish sisters, but I'm guessing there's not an interest in paying taxes on the benefits that they're receiving from the university and the athletic department. So also, the increased expense of the employment models, that means that dollars are going to have to be taken from one area and put into others. So any company or organization that is faced with an increased expenses and decrease in revenue has to make tough decisions on what that model looks like going forward. So we're not any different from any other organization. We will continue to invest in our revenue drivers. That's important for us, which is football and men's basketball, but also with Title IX in mind. But that goes back to trying to have a safe haven for us from an employment standpoint, from a Title IX standpoint, and from an antitrust standpoint to allow the model to continue to move forward with broad-based programs.
Can you give examples of the types of sports that could potentially be on the chopping block if you had to pay athletes as employees? What would be the non-revenue sports that not necessarily just Alabama, but that universities would think seriously about eliminating?
Yeah, and Senator, obviously at the University of Alabama, we don't ever want to do that. However, if college athletics is important at the University of Alabama. We think it's an important part. We look at the growth since Coach Saban showed up in town over 17 years ago of our university, of our athletic department, of our community, the way we can support our student athletes collectively across the board. But it's the Olympic sports that would be in jeopardy, and that's men and women. And that's not, if you look at the numbers for us at the University of Alabama with our 19 sports outside of football and men's basketball, I mentioned we lost collectively almost $40 million. And we funded that through our revenue from a football and men's basketball standpoint. So potentially, which one specifically? If I'm just saying this in general, if I'm a swimming student athlete, if I'm a tennis, if I'm a track, any of those sports, those are really important to our universities. We want to compete in them. I can't stress that enough. But there also will have to be decisions made because there's not an unlimited supply of money like some believe.
So swimming, tennis, track, golf,
soccer,
wrestling, soccer,
all those things.
Volleyball.
There's been that in the past where sports have been eliminated by institutions, some very good institutions.
Haley and Hannah, I'm interested. What do y'all think on the question of should student athletes be employees? Do y'all want to be employees? Does that sound like a good idea, or what are your thoughts?
I would say I stand on whether that there should be no limitations within athletes. I don't necessarily have an opinion on if they should be employees or not. I think that that is kind of up in the air still, and I'm just a firm believer that there should be no limitations regarding the student athlete. Kind of how Mr. Phillips was touching on the benefits, Title IX, cost of living, etc. I think that if those benefits were taken away, if college athletes became employees, and if one college athlete is an employee, then that makes all of us. I think there would be some type of limitation when it comes to being a student athlete, but I'm not very sure.
Coach, what are your thoughts on these questions?
Well, first of all, the whole agency who runs college athletics, I think that an independent agency outside the government could do it, but I also think the government's got to set the guidelines so that that institution can run it with some protection from litigation. On the whole employee thing, you know, the press, who I love and has always been one of my greatest allies for years.
I will point out those are words that have never been said in this room.
Sort of, you know, painted me as somebody who said, I think that college athletes should be employees. What I referenced is I think the system that we have in the NFL, where players are employees, would be better than the system that we have now, because at least it creates competitive parity in terms of everybody gets to draft relative to one loss. Schedule is based on one loss. Players, agents are controlled by the Players Association. So there was a lot of good things about that. But that really wasn't the point I was trying to make. The point that I was really making, and made it, but it never got printed, was that I don't think that college athletics is really a business. You know, college athletics is revenue producing, and that revenue is reinvested in all athletic programs across the board. So, you know, we're hearing these figures about how much revenue football creates and basketball, men's basketball creates, but that's all reinvested in the student athlete, and it's reinvested in opportunities for sports for other students to be able to participate in and compete in. So Wayne Huizenga owned the Miami Dolphins when I was the head coach there, and he was a great man. He was in business. You know, he made money every year. He paid so much for the team. He made the team better and sold it for more than he paid for it. So that's business. Nobody takes a profit in college athletics. So, but at the same time, I'm for student athletes being able to share in some of this revenue. And I think the number one solution to all this is if we could have some kind of a revenue sharing proposition that did not make student athletes employees. You know, I've heard people talk about if you're a music student and you write a piece of music and you do it in a class and you do it with a professor, and you can get reimbursed for that and make money, but not necessarily be an employee. So I think that may be the long-term solution. I think you could create a better quality of life for student athletes. You could still emphasize development, personal, academic, brand, and athletic development with a system like that. And it would be equal in all institutions. In other words, you know, somebody couldn't go out and raise more money at one school to create a competitive advantage from another. And boosters could then channel their resources back into the institution rather than into a collective, which makes it tax deductible, which makes it more beneficial for the institution and the athletic department in so many ways to provide the resources that we want to provide to student athletes. So I don't want them to be employees, but I want them to share in the revenue some kind of way.
So I'll note Senator Blumenthal has joined us now. Coach, I would love for you to elaborate on something you made reference to. What is the difference from the perspective of an athlete being a college football player versus playing in the NFL? How are those different, and why do those differences matter?
Well, I think the biggest thing is what we always tried to emphasize to our players, and they all bought into it, and it was beneficial to a large degree based on our graduation rate and how many players had opportunities to play in the NFL, is, you know, first of all, you're going to college to create value for your future. So you're really going to college to prepare yourself for the day you can't play football. In the meantime, so that makes academics really important. But in the meantime, we also want to try to help you develop a career as a football player. So what are your goals and aspirations for what you want to accomplish, and what does that entail? What do you have to do to be able to create this opportunity for your future? And I would have guys define that and try to help them. I try to provide the leadership, the discipline, the perseverance, the pride and performance, and all those things that it takes to have a player reach his full potential so he would have an opportunity to play at the next level. But playing in the NFL there was a spirit in college athletics which I think has always been great. I mean, fantastic in terms of the self-gratification and the feedback that not only I got from seeing players develop, but what happened, how the players felt about themselves as they developed. So to keep that spirit intact, I think, is very, very important. In the NFL, I don't want to use the term players play for money. And the longer they can play, and the more money they can make, the more beneficial they are. So they love their coach because if you're a guy that can help them do that, they absolutely will respect you in every way, shape that you could ever be respected. But a college player is looking to the coach for the leadership to create the values necessary to be that. And there's a little different spirit, I think, involved in that. And it was great. I loved it for so many years. And I hope that we can come up with some model that can continue to help us be able to do that.
Okay, now I want to recognize Senator Thune, who played basketball in college, and I would not note, despite the fact that he's 6'5", 6'6", he still refuses to play in my weekly hoops game. And
I don't want to get injured.
and there are a lot of injuries, but Senator Thune's.
Thanks, Senator Cruz. And Coach, congratulations on your retirement. Hard to replace a legend, but Mr. Byrne, we appreciate the fact that you hired a native South Dakotan, Kalen DeBoer. You'll have a lot of Tide fans in South Dakota in the upcoming season. I appreciate Senator Cruz doing this, and thank you. This is great perspective, hearing it from the athletes and the commission, the conferences, coaches, and in many ways, it really is identifying, I think, all the issues we need to deal with. And Senator Cruz has a discussion draft out there, which I really like. It hasn't been introduced in the form of a bill yet, but I hope we can settle on some basic principles. And I'm somebody who believes that we ought to use a light touch, not a heavy hand. I don't think government comes in with a heavy hand. It doesn't usually get a good outcome. But I think if there are some general rules of the road, one of which would be transparency. There's been a lot of discussion around a uniform standard contract that coaches and student athletes and parents and agents, everybody kind of knows what the deal is. I think that would be enormously helpful. And I think the issue on preemption as well. A lot of states are passing their own laws right now, you know, I'm sure it's going to be very hard to comply with a lot of state laws, particularly when you've got conferences that span multiple states. And so I'm very interested in something that provides those general rules of the road, and perhaps we can do it in the form of some sort of federal legislation. And then finally, I would just say to the point that's been raised and touched upon, I think, really well here today, the whole issue of the employee-employer relationship to me is really problematic. And, you know, I come from a state where we have mid-major Division I schools and a lot of Division II. We have a conference called the Northern Sun Intercollegiate Conference, which is the Dakotas, Minnesota, Iowa, and down to Nebraska, Wayne State, Nebraska. A lot of great schools who are very, very concerned that if you go to that type of an arrangement where they become employees essentially of the school, that a lot of the Olympic sports and Title IX sports, they just won't be able to afford to keep them. And I think there are so many opportunities provided for student athletes to compete in so many ways that is incredibly, I think, enormously beneficial. And I hope that we don't lose that. And so as we think about how this is structured, I appreciate the fact that the genie's out of the bottle and people have talents and they ought to be compensated for that, but done in a way, hopefully, that doesn't create a lot of just harm to smaller schools, schools and universities that are offering some wonderful opportunities to student athletes across the country. So my thoughts and everything that I've heard today really, I think, addresses those things, and I hope that Senator Cruz, we can come up with something that would fit the bill, that is a consensus-based approach, and hopefully enables us to preserve what is really great about college sports. And by the way, I was at the Alabama Ole Miss game this year, and there are some incredibly rabid fans, passionate fans in college sports, which is why it's really important that we get this right. Thanks.
Thank you, Senator Thune. I'll now turn to recognize Senator Blumenthal, who's been very active in legislating in this area, and I would note he did something truly epic and I think unprecedented in celebrating UConn's national championship. He actually broke his leg, which I think is worth at least 5 points in the polls. I want to commend him. There is being a fan, and then there's actually suffering an injury celebrating your victory.
I literally had skin and bones in the game. So, and I'm not going to break my leg again if UConn, the men or women, win the national championship. Actually, I owe my broken leg to a staff person who knocked me over and then fell on top of me, but that's another story.
Is that person still on staff?
He is on a different staff. I really want to thank you, Senator Cruz, and all of you who are here, who represent really the best of this enterprise and the people who care, who really have very genuine feelings of caring for college athletes, students, athletes. And I am very proud to have worked with Senator Moran and Senator Booker on a comprehensive bipartisan framework, which I hope will attract more support among my colleagues on both sides of the aisle. This issue really ought to be bipartisan. And I hope that we can keep the lens broadened, as you suggested, Coach, in your remarks just now, to be on the total career, the total lifetime of the student athlete, and on guaranteeing educational opportunities. The scholarship that is made available at the outset, make sure that it can be used throughout a lifetime, not just limited to those 4 years, that there are health and safety guarantees. A trust fund is what we propose, but whatever you want to call it, make sure that health care is provided, not just in the surgical suite, in the operating room, but also afterward in the rehab and the kinds of assistance that are needed. These are contact sports, you know, basketball, football, a lot of them result in injuries that can be life-altering, not for the better. And there are equities here, racial equities, gender equities, that I think we need to be very sensitive to addressing. And I just really want to thank all of you for your contribution. We're going to continue to work on some of the language and hopefully work together with Senator Cruz on coming together on a joint product, not something that we throw together to score political points, but really something that can be enduring as a contribution here, setting standards and providing some national standards, because I think the state-by-state approach is ultimately going to be counterproductive, both for the schools and for the athletes, because for some it will be a race to the bottom rather than trying to elevate it as we should. So thank you, Senator Cruz, for convening us, and thank you all for being here.
Well, and I thank Senator Blumenthal. Your team and mine have been working together, I think, very productively in trying to find common ground. And if we can bring the two parties together, that's the only way this is going to get passed. And I think it needs to get passed. You know, on the question of the conflicting state standards, I will say Texas has passed an NIL law, and it's the only law I know of where in the legislation, and the Texas legislature explicitly calls on Congress to act and says it doesn't make any sense for us to do this at the state level. Congress needs to act. I don't know of a legislature doing that in any other context, and I think it underscores the unique role Congress has in addressing this. I would note Senator Capito has joined us. Senator Capito, I don't know if you have any questions or comments for the folks around the table.
Well, I apologize for coming in late.
Actually, by design, we've had people coming and going, so it...
Okay, thank you, Senator Cruz, for doing this, and thank you all for being here. And I will apologize up front if this question has already... I have two really main issues that I'd like to ask questions about. I'm native West Virginian, like Mr. Saban, and he knows that our state does not have any professional teams. Our professional teams are our college and university teams, and I will say shout out to the Marshall University girls who are going to be, for the first time, going to the NCAA tournament this year for the first time in something like 30 years. So I'll give them the thundering herd. But my question is, because we and I would say, Coach Saban, you're the one who probably could address this the most, being a native West Virginian. How do we preserve our small states in this whole race? We don't have the economics to be able to bring the big splash. We have the will, but we can't compete with Texas, California, and other states to be able to particularly in the football and basketball sports, be able to bring that athlete that everybody's competing for. So how do we create a system that can still preserve that small state yet very competitive team to all the people who really care about that?
Well, we have some similar circumstances in Alabama
Right.
from the standpoint that we don't have any professional teams as well. So, but I do think what we're all searching for is something that is equal in all states. I do think we need some national legislation, and it shouldn't be done state by state. But at the same time, if we revenue shared a certain amount, it would be the same in West Virginia as it would be in Texas or California or Alabama or wherever it would be. And I think that's the issue right now is we don't have that. We have collectives that in some places are raising huge amounts of money.
Right.
And going to compete against people who do not have the same resources to raise those kind of funds to pay players. So you have a pay-for-play system and a free agency system that has no guidelines. So there's no competitive balance, which is, I think, what you speak to about how do we do this in West Virginia. Well, I think there's going to be a lot of places that are going to say that, and you're going to create a caste system where the rich will get richer and the poor will get poorer, and eventually the fans will look at it like, I really don't want to watch this game, and I don't think this funding collectives is sustainable. Because eventually people are going to say, I've already had people come to me and say, I don't want to continue to do this because we're paying a player and then the player's not there. He transferred.
Right.
So we don't even get the benefit of watching the player that we were supposed to get to watch. So there's a lot of internal issues right now that I certainly appreciate the fact that there's enough interest here to look into this and try to create some guidelines that'll help us be effective in terms of the future of college athletics and the development of college athletes.
Thank you for that. And, obviously the preservation of the health and safety of the athlete is critical here, not just, and I think it's more than just physical health. I think mental health, if you've got somebody who's you maybe got a lot of money, what happens with that money? What happens to that student athlete if they don't perform? But importantly, what happens to their education at the same time? I think that's sadly at the back burner of are we going to get graduates? Are we going to have another skill? We see so many of our great athletes that have been able to create other kinds of careers for themselves, but that's probably a very small minority. And we know that there's others that maybe had peak earning potentials and then have gone on to either had injuries or other things happen and some sad family stories. So just a commentary on that. My last question is to the Cavenders because I had a daughter played NCAA Division I volleyball. I'm really concerned about what the impacts this will have on our female sports and our girls. We know that women athletes that compete on teams become leaders, business leaders, political leaders. They have the leadership potential. We learn how to win and lose. And around here, we're great losers, aren't we, Senators? We like to win a lot more, like you all do. But I mean, all these important life skills.
Do well.
Yeah, but I mean, and you've probably addressed this issue. So if you just kind of give me the short there on how you think NIL is good for women's sports or how it can be made better.
In my opinion, I think name, image, and likeness has helped female sports more than not. I think that you can see so many female athletes capitalize off of their name, image, and likeness. For us and other people that come to my mind, you can use your name, your brand, your social status on social media, and brands want to work with you regardless of how well you're performing at your sport. So I think that the sky's the limit for female athletes when it comes to discussing name, image, and likeness. I do think that there is still gender equity that needs to be talked about, and obviously we are still for pro-female athletes. within that. I think that there's brands and companies out there that are trying to decrease that by creating NIL, female funds, etc. But I do think that it's been very successful in benefiting a female athlete.
Yeah, kind of just talking about what Haley said, I think when NIL did pass, a lot of people didn't think it would benefit the female athlete as much as it did. I know that we were talking a lot about going professional, but a lot of people, if you aren't playing women's basketball, or let's say you're gymnastics and you don't want to go professional, being able to profit and make as much money as you can in college and be able to create a brand and set yourself up for future, I think is very, very important. Obviously, you don't have, if you are in women's basketball, you don't have that as many opportunities to go pro, and you'll have to go overseas and learn that. So I think within NIL, I think it's honestly has been kind of paved the way by female athletes in a sense. So.
Thank you. I would say, too, through our committee, we finally passed last year the equal pay for equal play for Team USA. But to think we were doing that in the year, what was last year? 2023. It took us that long to get there. I will say the USTA has had 50 years of pay equity for female and male athletes in the professional realm. So I think we have a ways to go here, and I want to make sure that we don't chill any opportunities for our female athletes that are never going to be pro, that are going to have the benefits of being able to have a sport and play an active sport that's just as meaningful to them than if you become the quarterback in the NFL or whatever you would be. So I thank you all for being here. Thank you for your indulgence of the question.
Senator Blumenthal.
Yeah, I have a question as well, and you may have already covered it. I apologize. First, let me just say on the issue of health and not just physical but emotional, the pressures are so high these days in college sports, and also the injuries can be the invisible injuries, head injuries. I'm on the Armed Services Committee and the Veterans Affairs Committee, and I've spent a lot of time and energy over the last 10, 13 years on the invisible wounds of war, and I think they are maybe deserving of greater attention in the area of sports as well. But I have a question on the employee model, and I don't know how deeply you've covered it so far, but I would be interested in your views, particularly after the Dartmouth announcement, the Supreme Court decision. Where is this trend going? I'm troubled by it. I gathered from your remarks, Coach, that you may be as well, but I'd be very interested in all of your views on it.
Well, employee model creates a lot of problems. I mean, one of the things I didn't mention is when I coached in the NFL, wherever we played, we had to file a tax return because we earned money in that place. Well, we're going to have college student athletes do that. I think the revenue share approach, if we could go down that road a little bit further, you can do that without making people employees. And the revenue share then does not impact women's sports. Even though they don't create revenue, you're still going to be able to create opportunities. All right, so it's a more relative approach to how we can move forward. We can make the quality of life better for players. They're not employees. They still have name, image, and likeness opportunities, and the ladies over here, they still can do name, image, and likeness. They still have those opportunities, but it's not going to be created. It's going to be something that they all earned. In other words, I'm not really for collectives, and I respect what these folks over here do, but I think those funds should go to the institution, not to create opportunities. Because, like Greg mentioned, Bryce Young had a Nissan deal that was a national deal. He had a Dr. Pepper deal, it was a national deal. He had a BMW deal, it was a national deal. He earned those. That's what name, image, and likeness was supposed to be. It wasn't supposed to be an opportunity for us to create something that would pay players. And but because this genie is out of the bottle, we should do something to revenue share and still have those name, image, and likeness opportunities for players who earn that and have that kind of brand.
Can I jump in there? Thank you. I agree with what Coach was saying there. If I could, Senator, I'd love to just address some of the things that we're doing from a health and wellness and well-being standpoint that often isn't talked about publicly, okay? For instance, at the University of Alabama, if you have a sports-related injury, you will continue to be rehabbed, surgery if necessary for the next 2 years after you're done competing for our institution. We have the ability to invest in mental health. We have a head of mental health services for the University of Alabama Athletic Department. Then we have 10 mental health counselors in the local community that we have access to around the clock. As the pressures you've talked about increase, we've seen mental health issues significantly increase as well. And so we're doing everything we can. We've actually added 4 clinical social workers to our athletic department who are boots on the ground, trying to be preventive rather than reactive. And I'm proud of what we're doing to support our student athletes in that manner. We are doing financial education. We offer a very extensive rehab for our rehabilitation for injuries as well. And sometimes we've offered rehabilitation in other areas for student athletes as well to help them through a very transformative time of their lives in 18 to 22 years old. I sat on the NCAA Football Oversight Committee for 5 years. Coach and I would talk about the meetings and what's taking place, and I think he would agree with me. The game of football in particular, but athletics as a whole, the education and the focus on head injuries, the preventive side of it from how you practice, but also the treatment from how you respond to it. When our head trainer goes into a coach's office, it's not asking permission if a young man or young woman could sit, practice or not practice. It's informing them to say, this young man, this young woman has a head injury, and this is the protocol that they will be going through, and the medical team will be the one that clears the young man and the young women. So we certainly don't have the data today, but I do strongly believe that our teams, our student athletes, are being handled in a very positive, safe way for their future health as well, which is a really good thing, and we're proud of that. So back to the employers side, Coach addressed that very well. One of the things, if I could follow up on when it comes to, Coach mentioned if somebody wrote a song and they were part of a class or part of the university when they did that. One of the things that we talk about is every school has some type of intellectual property policy where schools share in the value of the IP that's created with their employees and their students, right? That shares the same percentage for everyone. But a chemistry student who makes a valuable discovery or pharmaceutical drug is probably going to make more money than an English student or a music student who writes a song or writes poetry, right? But the percentages is going to be the same. And so as we're trying to navigate where we go, and obviously we want to be focused on sustaining the broad-based model, that's really important to what we do. We care about all of our student athletes across the board for all of our sports, but we realize the pressures that are on there. And could there be a group's right standpoint from a revenue sharing standpoint where it's recognized based off of revenue driven by each individual sport? So if a women's basketball player is generating revenue that has the opportunity to, that the women's basketball student athletes have the opportunity to share in that, a small percentage of that, not keeping in mind all the other investments that we make in them. That's the same thing for a tennis student athlete, a swimming, or football, men's basketball. Because right now that's being controlled by the court system, which is putting us in a very challenging position. We know that there's billions of dollars on the line in potential damages that could have significant negative impacts on the intercollegiate model, on the Olympic model, and from coaches, from administrators, and from student athletes standpoint. When I hear everybody talk, I think we got a lot more in common and things that we want to do and figure out here, because we all very much care about the enterprise of college sports. But we're going to need your all's help in that process too.
Well, let me say, Mr. Byrne, I agree with you. It is striking how much common ground there is across the different players. I want to take a minute to recognize Senator Moran, who's been very active on this issue and thinking through it and working collaboratively across the aisle to try to do so. Senator Moran, if you have questions or comments.
I guess I have a few comments, but not many. First of all, I was here earlier for the suggestion that Texas and Alabama sometimes compete. Coach, you should know that most people in America, certainly in the Big 12, appreciate when you beat Texas. In case it may be that
you weren't in Tuscaloosa this year, were you?
Yeah. Well, there was a Kansas State team that was in that played in the Sugar Bowl with your team as well 2 years ago. this is a really important issue, and I'm glad that I'm back here as Senator Blumenthal has returned. So a long time ago, 4 years ago, I chaired a subcommittee in this Commerce Committee that has responsibility for amateur athletics. We cut our teeth on the Olympics, and then we got NIL in our lap, and then 4 years ago, we held the very first hearing in Congress on name, image, and likeness. Senator Blumenthal was the ranking member, the lead Democratic member of the subcommittee, and we've worked ever since 4 years. I haven't asked Richard today, but mostly we would tell each other, we're just this close to getting something done, but it's been going on a long time. And Senator Blumenthal brought in Senator Booker, and Senator Cruz has joined us in his role as the ranking member of the Commerce Committee. There is no bill that's going to get done without his involvement and engagement and cooperation. My message would be that I loved hearing that you thought there was a lot of commonality here. I think that's true. In 4 years of trying to figure out the legislative effort, we are this close. And if you all can help us, just everybody tell us what they can give and what they can take to get us just that much closer, I think a bill it's certainly the evidence is there that it's more needed. And the desire on the part of Republican and Democrat members of the Commerce Committee, but of the Senate as a whole, is evident. So my message, and now 4 years from now, I may be proven wrong that it didn't take 4 years, it didn't take 8 years, it took something longer, but this is the moment to strike. And please help us close that gap and get this done. We ought to be a Senate, a Congress of accomplishments, not of efforts. I know many of you in this room because of this history, and you're always kind enough to thank me for my efforts. I'd be delighted if you could thank me for my results, and I need your help. We need your help in getting results. And what I heard today suggests that that's clearly possible, because it seems to me everybody has the best interest of college athletes and college athletics in their heart. This is important to the country, and our constituents care. Let's get our work done.
Well, and Jerry, I will say I appreciate your invoking the wisdom of that great philosopher Yoda. There is no try, do or do not, and hopefully we can do. I think this has been a very productive conversation. I want to give everyone an opportunity for any final closing comments before we wrap up. So I'll just open the floor if someone has. We're going to wrap up shortly, but
Yeah, I'll hop in a little bit on collectives. And first off, I want to echo what I think everyone has shared, that I think that this has been very productive, and there's a lot more common ground here than maybe we were aware of. With Coach Saban and some of the ideas around revenue sharing, I think that's an imperative thing that needs to take place. We may have a different view of the role of collectives after that, or what role they play. But I think on the core issue of revenue sharing and why that's important, we're all mostly on the same page. I would point back on our side of things. Collectives being a part of this ecosystem, we kind of got pulled in at the beginning. There was opportunity there. Boosters were looking for opportunities to get involved. Schools were looking to get opportunities to their athletes. And as that became the norm, became something that schools or programs created. I think that they've evolved now to where we are running, and members of our association and other collectives are running businesses. It's not all donor and booster funded. There's a lot of brand deals that come through there. Coach Saban's exactly right when he says that it's not sustainable for donors to continue to pump money into collectives. And collectives know that, and that's part of the reason for the association as well, is to help them create additional revenue streams and ways to provide opportunities to the athletes. So, but we're looking forward to being part of this, the solution, and working with everybody here at the table and in the space to make sure we can create an athletic atmosphere that works for everybody.
great. Mr. Heitner, any closing
Thank you very much. Considering what Senator Moran just stated, that there's now been over 10 different hearings on this subject, I don't think 4 years ago revenue sharing was a serious consideration. So look how far Congress has even come on that subject. And it's very important. Going back to my opening statement, if anything is going to get done, it needs to be nonpartisan or bipartisan, depending on your perspective. And I think of penultimate importance here is that if Congress is motivated to affirmatively classify athletes as not being employees, then it should also do the job of ensuring better working conditions. I credit Alabama for doing a wonderful job at Alabama, but Congress needs to step in if it is going to make sure that athletes are not employees, to also then help them out and codify that those working conditions are set in place for every school across the country. And then separately, I'm thrilled to hear so many people talking about revenue sharing, whether it be Mr. White or Coach Saban. So I think that is a necessity if we're going to go down that path in making sure that athletes are not considered employees, that Congress is doing a little bit of their bargaining for them and ensuring better working conditions. I agree. It's gotten a bit awkward, I'd say, with respect to collectives. You have coaches, you have athletic directors actually asking the common fan to take out their hard-earned money and to support the collectives that in turn are paying the players. That is a bit chaotic, and something needs to be done about that.
Haley, Hannah, any closing thoughts?
I would just say thank you again for having us. I'm grateful to be a part of a conversation to help find a common ground to benefit all student athletes, and looking forward to seeing what comes about it in the coming years. Following Haley, I just think that we're both prime examples of what name, image, likeness can do. Just finding a more seamless system to help a college athlete. I think that's what we're all trying to do here. So we're in favor of that in the college athlete.
Mr. Phillips?
Thank you. Thank you again, Senator Cruz and Senator Moran, Senator Blumenthal. The time is now. It really is, for all that has been said earlier. So to me, the three takeaways: continue to protect and advance college sports and all that it means. Continue to protect the opportunities that it provides for young men and women, 500,000 student athletes that are receiving $4.1 billion in aid and scholarships. And then let's continue to provide resources and opportunities for our student athletes to benefit even at a greater height as we move forward. But we need this national standard to come to fruition. So thank you again for all your time and energy, and going to be accomplishment, Senator Moran, okay?
Thank you. Coach Saban?
I hope that everybody here, certainly the people that are involved in this little debate that we're having here today, which is very positive and very good, realizes how much interest and how many people are concerned about the future of college athletics. You know, I spoke yesterday, Jupiter Island Yacht Club, which they don't even have a dock, but I don't know how it's a yacht club. But all of these folks were former presidents of IBM and CEOs of companies. And the first question I get asked anytime I do a speech and we open it up is, what are we going to do about college athletics? So this is a major concern. Because the spirit of college athletics and the opportunities that it's created for so many people for so many years is just, I mean, it's a part of our fiber as a country. And people are definitely concerned about what is the future going to bring, because nobody really likes the direction that we're heading in right now. So I certainly appreciate what was done here today by Senator Cruz, Senator Blumenthal, everyone else that's involved in this, Senator Moran. But we need to keep the momentum going to try to make something happen that gives us a viable future to develop young people and continue to create opportunities for that.
Mr. Byrne?
I echo what Coach Saban, let me try this again. Echo what Coach Saban is saying there. The national standard that Commissioner Phillips talked about is critical. The ability to have broad-based programming across the board and the impact that has for young men, young women in our country. But have safe harbor to give us the ability to navigate these waters from a Title IX perspective, from an employment perspective or non-employment perspective more likely, and realize that we are just in January, a major litigation case could be coming to trial that would have an impact on our industry in the billions of dollars. So time is running out on that. with what's ahead. And so I can't stress the importance of that enough. I can't tell you how much we appreciate the senator and everybody involved with this, and it's good to hear everybody is interested in having a long-term solution that's good for our student athletes, that's good for our universities and athletic departments, and good for our fan bases who care so much, like Coach talks about, who care so much about what college athletics represents. And I tell our coaches and staff this, and our student athletes, college athletics is one of the things that brings everybody together. When you come into Bryant-Denny Stadium on a Saturday, or if you're at our softball game at Rhodes Stadium, which we lead the country in softball attendance, by the way, the passion that people have, the unity that it creates, both within the team, within the fan base, within the community, within our country, is very special. And it's not perfect because there's not a perfect enterprise out there. But there's so much good that takes place within an athletics department that all of us, I truly do believe, want to see that be able to be sustained for the long haul. So we appreciate everybody's work on this. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank all the witnesses. I will say, in terms of unity, if I can close with a very brief, humble brag, college athletics represents the one argument I've won with my wife in 23 years of marriage. And that was when Heidi and I went to the Rose Bowl when Texas was playing USC. And Heidi's a native Californian, and she announced she was going to dress in USC red. And I said, "Sweetheart, I love you, but we will throw you out of the truck." and she decided she didn't care that much about it, and so I dressed my wife in burnt orange head to toe, and we won the national championship. So that was, I'll take one argument victory. Dick, I don't know that you can claim an argument in 23 years, but I have one, and I'm holding on to that one. Look, this is an issue that matters to everyone. We have a lot of serious leaders who came together for, I think, a very productive conversation, and I hope that the spirit of this conversation carries forward, that we continue to see bipartisan cooperation. As Jerry said, I think we're close. I think we're really close, and we need to get it done. If we don't get it done, the consequences for thousands and thousands of young people across the country would be enormously harmful. And so I appreciate everyone being part of this, and I look forward to the next stage and to hopefully getting the legislation agreed to, passing it, and getting it over the finish line, because then we can go cheer for our respective teams and have all the joys and benefits that college sports brings. Thank you.